Let's begin with a question that most people don't get around to asking. What if despair isn't just a feeling? What if it's a place that you go when nowhere else feels safe? You see, it's easy to mock or judge or someone who's caught in hopelessness, to call it dramatic or lazy or weak. But if you've ever really sat inside despair, if you've ever actually been there, not just visiting it, but setting up camp in it, then you know it doesn't feel like a dramatic performance. It feels like gravity. It feels like giving up, not because you're weak, but because when you're holding on, it hurts far more than letting go. That's what the black pill is for many men. Not just a dark ideology, not just a worldview, but a way to survive the crushing weight of unmet needs. And for those unfamiliar, the black pill refers to the belief that your chances at love, at sex, or even basic emotional connection are dictated entirely by genetics or your bone structure or your status, and that no amount of effort can change your fate. That the game is not just rigged, it's actually locked into place. And here's the part that often gets overlooked. Men don't land in the black pill area because they're nihilists. They land there because they once had hope. It was a real hope. It was a vulnerable hope, a hope that over time got obliterated slowly and repeatedly and often humiliatingly. So this episode today, we're talking about what happens after that destruction of hope. Not the Reddit debates, not the rage posts, but the quiet part, the human part, the part that no one sees, the ache of being unchosen, the exhaustion of trying and never being wanted back, the moment when despair stops feeling like defeat and instead starts feeling more like the only thing that won't leave you. That's what we're here to expose and explore a bit. So let's rewind a bit, shall we? Imagine you're a boy growing up without any emotional language. You're not taught how to express loneliness. You're not modeled tenderness by the men who are around you. You're praised when you're stoic, and you're dismissed when you're too soft. So what do you do with your ache? Well, for most, they bury it. You start developing strategies. Maybe you become funny or smart, or you pour yourself into your schoolwork or your gaming or even working out. And you build this armor because somewhere along the way, you've learned that love is a reward for performance, not something that you're allowed to receive because you're you. Then fast forward to adolescence, and then you have crushes and you have flirting and late night texts that feel like the whole world to you. And you start to open up and you start to care. And then almost immediately you start to get hurt. Maybe you're ignored. Maybe you're friend zoned. Maybe someone tells you something like, "Oh, you're like a brother to me." Or worse, "I'd never date anyone like you." And then it happens again and again and again. And here's the thing that nobody really talks about. These aren't just minor rejections. When you've been starved of emotional connection, every disappointment feels catastrophic because it's not just about getting a date. It's finally being chosen, finally mattering, finally proving that all the years of invisibility didn't mean that you were unlovable. So when those moments collapse, they don't just sting, they shatter something at the core of you. And over time, the story starts to form, one that feels more protective than hopeful. Maybe I was never meant for connection. That thought doesn't just show up overnight. It builds and it hardens and it starts to whisper and ends up as a wall. And this is where the black pill enters like a lifeboat. Not because it's healthy, but because it's stable. It gives language to the pain. It gives a certainty to the chaos. It turns personal heartbreak into a shared systematic systematic explanation. And you're not just failing, you're outclassed. You're not just unattractive, you're biologically disqualified. You're not just unlucky, you're cursed by evolution. And while that sounds devastating, to the man who's been slowly drowning in confusion and shame, this actually feels somewhat comforting. Why? Because it absolves you. It says you were never the problem. The world is broken, the rules are rigged, and trying again is just setting yourself up for more pain. And so you stop trying. And at first, that feels like a relief, like a pressure valve has been released. There's no more forced smiles. There's no more humiliating rejections. There's no more pretending to be okay when really you're crumbling on the inside. And so you retreat and you lurk. You consume and you post and you scroll, and slowly you disappear. But let's pause here, because what I've just described, that isn't some rare or radical descent into the darkness. This is something that millions of men are experiencing quietly. Not just the ones who identify as incels, but men across all walks of life who've decided that connection is too dangerous and it's too painful, it's too humiliating to pursue. They may not call this the black pill, but they've swallowed it just the same. And the rest of society, well, we barely notice. Or worse, we notice only when tragedy strikes, when someone explodes after years of being ignored, and then when the violence forces us to pay attention to the pain we previously were missing. But what if we didn't wait for the explosions? What if we listened sooner? What if we took seriously the quiet erosion of hope that's happening in the bedrooms and basements and chat rooms all around the world? See, this episode is your invitation to do that, to take a long and compassionate look at why so many men are choosing despair over desire, and why numbness feels smarter than vulnerability, and what it might take to build this bridge back before it's too late. Let's go a little deeper, shall we? One of the most overlooked truths about this despair is that despair is often a coping mechanism. It's not a conclusion, it's a coping mechanism. We assume that those who give up have made a rational decision that's based on careful thought. But that's really the case, you see. Despair often comes from exhaustion, not clarity. It shows up when someone has tried every door, knocked until their knuckles were bleeding, and still found that no one was on the other side to open the door. And when that happens over and over, your nervous system starts protecting you from further humiliation. It whispers, stop hoping, it's not safe. And that's when despair starts to feel like the mature option. It's not because you're dramatic. It's because you're tired. It's because hope has hurt you, and no one has taught you how to hope in a way that doesn't destroy you. The black pill gives structure to this exhaustion. It offers a belief system with sharp edges, and a worldview that ties together every rejection, every ghosting, every ignored message, every half smile that wasn't returned. But what makes it so seductive isn't just the logic, it's the emotional payoff, because the black pill promises freedom from false hope. And that's where things get really dangerous, because real hope, the kind of hope that's built on self-respect and emotional safety, is not toxic. But false hope is toxic. False hope is when you keep contorting yourself to be loved. When you believe that if you can just hit the right combination of words and weight and wealth, and someone will finally unlock the door. False hope convinces you that love is earned by fixing yourself, not by being yourself. And when you chase that kind of hope, For years, it breaks something on the inside. And so when the black pill says, don't bother, no one's coming, it doesn't sound cruel. It sounds merciful. It feels like giving you back your dignity. But here's the bait and switch, if you will. The black pill doesn't just free you from false hope. It quietly steals all the hope. It doesn't say you were chasing the wrong kind of love. It says you were never even worthy of love in the first place. And that message, it lands hard, especially when it mirrors the things you already fear are true. When the belief that you're too ugly is compelling, and that you're too weird and you're too sensitive and you're too broken. The belief that the world has a party that's going on and you were never invited to the parking lot. These beliefs become your emotional bedrock. And the more you repeat them, the more they feel like truth. Not because they are the truth, but because no one has dared to speak a kinder story to you and actually mean it. Let's talk a little bit about masculinity for just a quick second. You see, most of us were never taught how to be wanted. We were never taught how to care for ourselves. We were taught how to be impressive. And from a young age, we learned that a man's value comes from his performance, how strong he is, how rich he is, how many women want him, how little emotions he's able to show, especially when he is hurting. And so what happens when you grow up and you find that you don't impress anyone? Not at school, you don't impress anyone in dating, you don't impress them in social circles, not even in your own family are you impressive. What happens when you try to do all the right things and still end up alone? You don't just feel rejected, you feel erased. And that erasure, it leaves you starving, not just for sex, but for significance, for belonging, for proof that you matter. And the black pill shows up in that starvation, and it offers you a meal. It says, come. It's not a nourishing meal, but one that stops the ache just enough to make it through another day. It says, this is the truth, and at least now you can stop trying. And here's the heartbreak. It feeds you just enough to stay alive, but never enough to actually live and thrive. I want to pause again here for not for the dramatic effect per se, but to speak directly to those of you who feel themselves in this black pill space. If you've resonated with any of this, if you've nodded silently, and if you've felt the tears welling up, pressing against your eyes, but you can't let them fall, I want you to hear this. My dear listener, you're not weak, you're not broken, you're not alone, but you are carrying the pain of so many boys who were never told that they were lovable before they had to prove themselves. So many young men who had no safe place to fall apart. So many human beings who just wanted to be held without having to earn it. And that ache is so valid. But the thing is, you don't have to turn it into your identity. You don't have to make your hopelessness sacred or holy. You are allowed to grieve everything that you never got. And you're allowed to build something that is new and unlike what you're experiencing. Not because someone else finally chose you, but because you decided that your worth was never up for debate. Let's not rush past that. Grief is not a weakness. Grief is a doorway. And when you allow yourself to grieve, the thing that you never received, the love, the affirmation, the gentle guidance, the touch, the sense of belonging, you create the space to receive something that's different in the future. You in essence make room for a new story, one that's not written by algorithms or ideologies, one that's not shaped by rejection or rage, but one that's built on integrity, where your inner truth matches your outward actions. And it's also based on intimacy, where someone can see you fully and still choose to stay with you. that story is more difficult to write, and it doesn't go viral, and it takes time, but it's yours, and it's worth living. So let's move now into the territory that the black pill ideology fears the most, and that is intimacy. I'm not talking about sex, not conquest, not a Tinder match, not a validation loop. I'm talking about the kind of intimacy that says, here's who I really am, and here's a terrifying hope that someone might still want me in the midst of who I truly am. See, for all the talk in the black pill spaces about rejection and looks and status, what's really being protected isn't your face or your body. It's your heart that's being protected, because if you strip away the ideology, if you unplug from the forums, and if you silence the noise, what remains is this raw and trembling question, and that is, am I lovable, even here, even now, as I am? That question haunts so many men, and most don't even know that they're asking that question in the first place, because it would mean admitting that you want to be seen, that you long to be chosen, that despite everything you've said, especially online, that there's this part of you that still hopes. And for many, that is even far more unbearable than anything else. Here's the real cost of despair that many don't talk about. It doesn't just protect you from the pain. This ideology distances you from love. And not just romantic love, but human connection in all of its forms. The black pill isolates. It narrows, it hardens, it turns your world into a binary winners versus losers, chads versus incels, alphas versus betas. But intimacy does not work like that at all. Intimacy doesn't follow the rules of worthiness. Intimacy doesn't care about the jawline or your Tinder ratio, but it asks something far more difficult. Can you risk being seen? Can you sit with someone and not perform? Can you stay present when you feel inadequate? Can you let someone know you? Not your mask, not your ideology, but can they know you? That's the kind of courage that despair talks you out of, because real intimacy feels much more dangerous than withdrawal. Let's make this more concrete, shall we? Imagine a man named Jonah. Let's say he's 29 years old. He works a job that pays okay. He's average height, average weight. His hair is thinning, and his confidence has followed. He's on the dating apps for years. He's taken the gym selfies. He's tried clever bios. He's even watched some dating advice videos that promise to unlock the code. But nothing has stuck so far. So he matches with someone once every few months. Usually they're bots or short conversations that really go nowhere. But every time he opens his inbox and sees nothing, he hears this familiar voice in his mind. It says, see, it's because you're not enough. And so Jonah withdraws, not just from dating, but from everything. He stops reaching out to friends. He stops going to his cousin's game nights. He logs into incel forums, not to learn, but to feel less alone in his anger. He doesn't rage, he instead numbs. Until one day, someone from work, a new coworker, invites him out with the team. It's a low stakes hangout, just beers and fries after the shift. But something in Jonah just wants to go, but something even louder says, they don't really want you there. You'll say something awkward if you go, or they're gonna pity you, not like you or genuinely see you. And so he chooses to stay home. And the loneliness deepens, but it feels familiar. And that familiarity feels far safer than risking the potential connection. That's what despair does. It doesn't need to scream. It just needs to convince you to settle for the silence. Now, here's what Jonah does not know. That coworker, she saw him eat lunch alone, and she noticed how quiet he was in the meetings. Thought that he seemed a little thoughtful, maybe a little shy, but kind. And she invited him because she sensed that he mattered, even if he didn't see it yet. But you see, Jonah will never know that because despair made the choice for him. And this is not just Jonah's story. This is the quiet heartbreak that's playing out in dorms and apartments and bedrooms all around the world. Men are starving for intimacy, but they're too hurt to believe that they could ever receive it. So what's the alternative? It's not a pep talk. It's not just believe in yourself monologue. It's not a shallow reframe. The alternative is a slow rebuild. One that starts with truths. Saying, I was hurt, I feel alone, or I believed I'm unlovable. And then slowly, and sometimes with help, sometimes even in solitude, you start asking new questions. Like, I wonder if that's the only story, or is there someone that I trust who might be able to help me rewrite my current story? Or am I willing to risk being seen again, even if it scares me? So you start seeking places where you don't have to perform. Spaces where other men are telling the truth. Communities that don't mock your ache, but actually hold it with care. That might be a therapist perhaps, or a support group, a 12-step group, an honest friend, even a podcast like this one. And from there you start practicing and you say hard things out loud, and you practice listening, and you allow the silence, and you let your guard down just an inch at a time. And slowly and ever so slowly, you start to experience something that the black pill never really offered. And that is real intimacy. Not a fantasy, and not a transaction, not the mass that you're familiar with, but being present and human and worthwhile. This is the work. It's not easy, but it is possible. And you don't have to do this alone. So let's close this journey with a part that often gets skipped, shall we? And that's rebuilding. Because it's one thing to leave despair, and it's another thing to figure out where to go instead. So here's the truth that most healing doesn't tell you up front. Hope is harder than despair. Hope asks you to try again with no guarantee. Hope asks you to risk, not because you're promised success, because your heart still matters. Hope asks you to believe in your worth, even when no one is clapping yet. And that's not easy. That's scary. And it's the work of a lifetime. So how do we begin this? Well, it starts with a different kind of strength. Not the kind that dominates, not the kind that hides, but the kind of strength that shows up in its flawed state, in its honest and willing state. Here are a few ways that strength looks in real life. It's admitting I'm lonely without mocking yourself for it. It's reaching out to someone even when your voice is shaky. It's choosing one small act of self-respect each day, like cooking a meal, or taking a walk, or texting someone just to check in. It's staying in the discomfort of growth instead of running back to the false comfort of cynicism. These aren't soft moves. This is warrior work, because when you've built your identity around despair, hope will feel like betrayal at first. But keep going. There's a version of you on the other side who will look back and whisper, "Thank you for not giving up on me." And well, what about society? What about those of us who don't identify with the black pill, but who want to help, who care? First, stop trying to fix people. we start trying to see them instead. We stop saying, just get over it. And when we start saying, what happened to you that this story feels safer than any other? We stop assuming that emotional numbness equals apathy. And instead we start recognizing that it's often a sign of deep unspoken grief. We stop labeling incels as threats and punchlines and start understanding them as human beings who are in pain. And that doesn't mean we excuse the harm. It means that we understand where the harm began, not in hatred, but in heartbreak. So if you're listening to this and you're deep in the black pill despair, please hear me on this one. This does not have to be the end of your story. You can change your course, not by becoming someone else, but by returning to someone you forgot that you were. You're not just a statistic. You're not just a face in the algorithm. You're not just a profile that's lost in the scrolling. You are a person with longing, with worth, with the right to rebuild. That will be terrifying, but you can do terrifying things. You've already survived this far, and that means that you're strong, whether you believe it or not. And to those who are in positions of influence, like teachers or counselors or family members, even strangers online, let this episode be your reminder. We are losing men every day, not always to violence, but to despair, to silence, and to resignation. And that loss doesn't just harm them, it hollows them out. It hollows all of us out because we stop making room for men's pain and we stop creating space for their love as well. And that is a deep cost that no society can afford. This podcast isn't a blueprint. It's more like a flashlight, if you will. It's here to help you name what you couldn't name before, to hopefully soften what's hardened and to honor what has been buried, and to say boldly, quietly, and clearly, you matter, you belong, and you're not too far gone. The black pill is not the final word. Despair is not the only truth. There is room for you here. Not when you've fixed yourself, not when you've become more attractive, not even when you've proved that you're worthwhile. But your worth exists now, just as you are in this moment, because that is where the healing begins. And that's what brings the bridge back to us. Won't you come join?